obviously as a silent protagonist, he's designed to be someone that you can project yourself onto. But I think a lot of us in the transmasculine community specifically have loved Link because he portrays a kind of masculinity that isn't dependent on hyper masculine stereotypes to be seen as valid. That heroicism doesn't have anything to do with gender or sex, that someone can be read as either and still seen as, priceless and an integral part of human life. We need those reminders more than ever.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. Let's start the episode, as we always do, with our Patreon shoutouts. These are a special thank you to everyone who subscribed at our Patreon name in the credits tier for the month of May. So that's a very big thank you to Genevieve, Lindsay, Jackie, Pimatai, Adiyinka, See Thee Mess, Ava, and Sammy. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the podcast. Remember, if you want to get your name in the credits, you can hop on over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can subscribe for as little as just $2 a month and get access to our monthly bonus series. We just released our June Patreon bonus episode last week, where we talked about Dredge, Diablo 4, and all the new games we're excited about following Summer Games Fest week. So if those sound like things you want to hear us talk about, or if you're just looking for a little more pixel therapy in your life, come check out the Patreon and you'll get access to over 20 bonus episodes of the podcast. There's so much good content there,
trove.
or at least we think so. Yeah, treasure trove. So yeah, come check that out if that's of interest of you. And if you already subscribe, or if you're looking for a way to show your support for free, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Every review matters there for a small podcast like us. And know that no matter how you choose to engage with us, we appreciate you being here all the same. All right, folks, it's time to get cozy, to pull up an armchair. Feel free to lie down on the couch. Let's talk about our feelings. Spencer, how are you today?
Jamie, I know you don't like reality TV, but if you get bored or you have a sudden personality change,
Noted,
I urge you to watch Ultimatum Queer Love on Netflix.
I can't, but okay. But go ahead and tell me all about it. I'll live vicariously through
you. It is
you.
mess. That's all I have to say about it. It is mess, and it is everything. Everything we needed this Pride Month. I have no words. I think, especially watching it from the perspective of being an intense therapy for the past 2 years, it's just an exercise in you need therapy, and you need therapy, and you need therapy. And also thank you for bringing all of this mess here for us to take in. But
oh my God,
I won't try to bore you with the lives and woes of a bunch of lesbians who you've never heard of. But I will say, my next question is, are you watching The Bear season 2?
Yes, so that's the hot mess that I've been watching, in which also everyone needs therapy.
Yes, just a different mess.
But yeah, just a different type of mess. I'm here for the scripted mess. Yeah, no, I've been watching The Bear. We're like 3 episodes into the second season, and we did a rewatch of the first. Well, it was a rewatch for me. My partner hadn't watched the first season of The Bear because he had COVID when I watched it. Unfortunately, that was like he's sick. I've got to pick something else to watch, and I blew through the entire season in like a night. And so when it was coming, when it got announced that the second season was coming, I was like, we should watch this because I want to rewatch it anyway, and I feel like you would like it. And he's into it, so yeah, we watched the whole first season and then started the second, and it's so good.
It's everything. I love the way that show is almost, it's not quite, but there's something that feels a little bit experimental about the way that it's all shot and put together. Like it feels rough, but not unfinished. It's just really interesting. It feels fresh.
Yeah. And there's such an underlying intensity to the show, which I know is something that's carried forward from the first season too. for folks not in the know, The Bear is a show starring Jeremy Allen White and Ayo Edebiri. Is that how you say her last name? And it's focuses on a like small, like kind of greasy spoon restaurant called the Original Beef of Chicago. In the first season, the main character, played by Jeremy Allen White, has inherited this restaurant that has been passed down through his family from his brother, who unfortunately committed suicide before the show begins. And so it's all about him trying to, and the restaurant's like, it's in disrepair. The staff that works there, they're very much a family, but like a super dysfunctional family. Folks are grieving over the loss of the previous owner and Jeremy Allen White, that being his brother. And everyone needs therapy. And it's a show that's as much about family and the stress that's put on folks working in both like simple kitchens and then like the higher level stress that's put on people who are trying to aspire to become chefs and what the culinary world looks like. And it's also about, how people can like learn to take care of each other and become better people. And it's just a really good show. Yeah. But they do these things like really intense close-ups on the food. Like there's lots of beautifully shot and delicious looking food in the show. But there's also things like where two characters are having a really intense, like stress-laden conversation about something while one character is chopping vegetables at a mile a minute, and the camera is just cutting back and forth between a really close shot of the knife flying over the vegetables and then the characters' faces as they're getting more and more heated. And you're just like, oh my God, you're perpetually like afraid someone's going to get a knife in the throat. And that never happens.
No.
But the tension that the show creates and how it understands what it's like to work in a kitchen and also what it's like to have really dysfunctional like family and workplace family dynamics like that it's really cool.
Yeah, you've really nailed it. Just the tension of potential violence or danger always hanging over everything.
And it's like the violence that actually ends up happening is so rarely physical. It is almost always these characters like being kind of emotionally abusive to each other, recognizing it, and then trying to reconcile with that after the fact. Both reconcile, as the person who got abused, like reconcile their feelings about that and whether or not they want to continue with this thing that they love that is also harmful to them. And then the person who caused the harm trying to figure out how they're going to do better and hold themselves accountable to next time. And I think the show does a good job of showing steady growth while still understanding that like people who are in this place are going to keep fucking it up even as they're trying to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just, it really hits because it's the concept of what goes on behind closed doors in the culinary industry is just fascinating on its own. And you have these characters that are so focused on the thing they love, the thing that they're passionate about, that there isn't too much room in terms of what the characters care about for you to get to know who they are individually if you're not paying attention. But because the show is so visually rich and it's like every scene, these are like 30-minute episodes and they are packed to the brim to the point where like you could rewatch an episode and get different takeaways each time. But I really enjoy how much you learn about the characters through little moments or set dressings that you could miss if you're just paying attention to like the meat of the conversation that's taking place. Like, for example, seeing in Jeremy Allen White's apartment that like he doesn't cook at home because his oven is full of really nice designer denim that he stores in his oven because that's the safest place. And it's like, okay, I've learned A, he doesn't cook at home because he never uses his oven, and B, like he cares very much about high quality, simple things like this designer denim that he doesn't let go of, even though he's, not rolling in dough as a professional chef. Or Ayo Edebiri's character, sitting at a restaurant, dining alone, and looking up and watching a mother and child interact, and a look passes over her eyes, and you remember that she's lost her mother at some point in her life, and that she's maybe yearning for that kind of connection. Like, it's just like these little things that pop up. Oh my God, the show is so good. Just watch the show.
It really is. It really is. Go check out The Bear. Hopefully we're not telling you anything you don't already know. So, but if you haven't watched it, go check it out. It's on Hulu.
Yeah, it's on Hulu.
Anyway. But yeah, maybe we should talk about video games.
Right,
that is
right.
kind of the premise of this silly little podcast. Spencer, I think folks are going to be surprised when they see the title of this episode, when they realize what we're about to discuss today. Maybe they're even going to be expecting us to really take this game down.
Oh.
Well, just I feel like you and I are notorious at this point probably for our dislike of this game's predecessor.
Yeah.
I'm bearing the lead here. We are going to talk about Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom today. Despite neither Spencer nor I really enjoying or even fully playing the predecessor, Breath of the Wild.
Best game ever made, apparently.
Best game ever made until Tears of the Kingdom came out.
Truth.
So if you are living under a rock, Tears of the Kingdom is a 2023 action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo Switch. It's a sequel to the 2017's Breath of the Wild, which sucked. JK.
We're
really
the only people who
off.
think it sucks.
Yeah, we're the only ones in the world. I've heard some people say it's mid. There's people out there. There's dozens of us.
And they're quickly silenced.
Yeah. Tears of the Kingdom is the 20th game in the Legend of Zelda main series. The first being The Legend of Zelda, just the titular Legend of Zelda, released on February 1st, 1986 in Japan on the Famicom Disk System. And that release was followed a year later in August of 1987 with the North American release of the same game on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Ever heard of it? The series as a whole centers on Link, who is our main protagonist and the player character. And the narrative typically revolves around Link's quest to rescue the Princess Zelda, and the land of Hyrule from the series' main antagonist, known as Ganon, or Ganondorf, depending on which of his two forms he takes. And in that regard, Tears of the Kingdom is not too different, really. It actually takes place just a few years after the events of Breath of the Wild, so it is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild and takes place in the same version of Hyrule that Breath of the Wild takes place in. And at the start of the game, Hyrule is in a period of rebuilding following the events of Breath of the Wild. But the appearance of gloom, this kind of dark, inky, black and red goo that's oozing out of the ground and making people sick and causing them harm, results in Link and Zelda going to investigate in the depths beneath Hyrule Castle. And of course, catastrophe ensues in an event that leaves Zelda missing, Link without an arm, and the entire land of Hyrule physically disrupted via an event that the people in the game moving forward will refer to as the upheaval, which has left giant gaping, is it chasms or chasms?
Yes.
This is one of those words that I've read but don't know how to say.
I've always said I've always said I've only ever read it too. Chasms.
Wow, chasms. It leaves big ass holes in the ground.
Big old holes.
Big old holes in the ground, as well as ruins. Ruins falling from way up above. Mm-hmm. So these ruins falling from the sky that no one knew were up there. And so the land is in upheaval, and Link must once again rise to the occasion to save Hyrule and the princess. And that is our inciting event for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Spencer, before we start getting into whether or not we liked this game or hated it as much as Breath of the Wild, just really want people to come for us. What's your personal history with the Legend of Zelda franchise?
Wow.
The series that is older than both of us.
Yes.
Me by less time than you. But
yeah. So, wow. You know, it's funny, playing this game definitely opened up some long dormant memories for me. I was absolutely a Nintendo gamer when I first picked up a controller at around the age of 5. My first Zelda game was actually Ocarina of Time, which I played, oh my gosh, I was maybe 8 or 9 when I first picked up that game. And I think it's an appropriate game to start with because in that game, you actually start out as Link as a child. And you sort of grow up with him and learn a bit more about him. And you enter this mysterious world as a child and kind of discovering it, very much like themes of coming of age and rising from a literal child to the hero of Hyrule. When I think back then, I think some of this still is felt in these more contemporary Zelda entries, but it was like back in the day when games still felt somewhat impenetrable, or like they were holding real secrets. Like those kind of Zelda games were the ones where the scope of the world was small enough that you could run around hitting every tree until you manage to knock one down that unlocks a secret room that is not written down in any guide. And we didn't really we weren't really using the internet back then to talk about games on forums. So it was just like, you had to just stumble across shit. And I just remembered spending hours, like I feel like Zelda was my special interest for a while when I was a kid. Like I would journal about it. I would draw endless pictures about it. I would buy physical copies of guides because that was a thing that we used to do, and pore over them, and try to just unlock the secrets that I knew were living in this game, and it just bringing that sense of exploration and adventure out into the real world. Like those are the kind of memories I associate with Zelda. I remember I used to receive Nintendo Power magazine, and there was an ad in the magazine where you could write your address on a little coupon and mail it in, and they would send you a life-size ocarina, which was like the instrument that Link plays, kind of like a flute in the game. And I got it, and I remember learning how to play it, and I was able to play some of the themes from the game. I still have that ocarina floating around somewhere, but
gotta bust that out.
I know, I gotta find that thing. It was just such a huge. It had a hold on me as a kid. I remember my next big Zelda game was Twilight Princess, which came out, I believe, in 2006. And that was a game where Link actually is cursed and he turns into a wolf. And you're playing as this wolf that has like you break free of these chains, and you have like these chains and shackles coming off of you, and you're this badass wolf. Yeah, it was hot. I'm like, thanks to Legend of Zelda, I figured out that I was both queer and a furry. So like, thanks. But I read some time ago that Link was actually named that because he is supposed to be the link between the player and the world of the game. Oh. And he's purposefully designed in a way that you can sort of project your own experience onto, because this is a game where everyone can take on the mantle of hero, and everyone can rise from being a nobody to the celebrated eternal hero. And I think that's something that a lot of us who are Zelda fans can have always loved about this series, is that like over and over through time, through different permutations, there's still that same core romantic, tragic, but ultimately, like, also innocent adventure of becoming. And I think just so many of us can relate to, especially like queer and trans folks, which we can talk a bit more about later. But yeah, I have a long history with The Legend of Zelda, but this is my first Zelda game that I've played in over 12 years, maybe 15 years. And that just feels really momentous because I really couldn't get into Breath of the Wild, but I'm really happy to be loving Tears of the Kingdom so much. It means a lot to me, more than I thought it would when I'm talking about it now. And I'm kind of like, oh, wow, this actually is really, really big deal to me. But yeah, that's my history with Legend of Zelda. Not to just pass it over to you, but I think maybe yours might be a little shorter. But what's your history with the game?
Mine's a little shorter. I've heard of the series. Yeah. I've known that it's a thing. Growing up did not have Nintendo. We didn't have Nintendo systems in the house. We were a Sega house and then PlayStation. So I definitely don't have the nostalgia or even the history when it comes to a lot of the core Nintendo franchises. I didn't really play the Mario games growing up, didn't really play Zelda. I know I'm not a real gamer. You heard it here first.
We have both sides of the spectrum here.
Yeah, you get both sides. Spencer, real gamer, has played the games. Me, not a real gamer. has not played anything. Grew up playing Madden. Anyway,
wow, get out.
Yeah, I know. I'll unplug my mic now. I'll send back my podcaster license. But yeah, anyway, hadn't played any of the Zelda games. I had a friend who I saw like playing one of the ones on GameCube and was like, oh, that looks cool. You're riding a horse.
Yeah.
But never had them, never played them. When Breath of the Wild was coming out, and that coming out right at the beginning of the Nintendo Switch launch as well, I definitely got caught up in the hype around that and got a copy of the game and tried it. And I was really into it for like a weekend, and then I just started to get more and more disconnected from it as I played it. Unfortunately, like I don't have the same Switch that I had back then, so I don't have the official hour count of what I put into Breath of the Wild. My guess is that it was 20 hours, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more, but probably thereabouts. It was like a good week that I spent with the game, which I know it's a huge game and there's so much more you can do in the game, but I just felt a little aimless, a little lost, and kept getting myself stuck in situations where I didn't have enough stamina to get out. I kept like falling into lakes that I didn't have enough stamina to swim out of. I was really struggling with the horse mechanics in the game and feeling like I wanted to have a horse, but then I would be on my horse for 5 seconds and then it wouldn't make sense to be on the horse anymore, and I'd climb away and then the horse couldn't come to me, and I started to get really frustrated and feeling like I couldn't make progress in the game. I didn't really know where I was supposed to go. I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing. I was getting my ass handed to me by any enemy I encountered, and I stopped. I didn't get it. I felt disconnected from the world. The game was quiet. It was empty, and I didn't resonate with the characters. Like there wasn't really, Link is a silent protagonist. I want to talk about this more later on in our conversation because it is something for me that is still, it makes it harder for me to connect. I understand why he is designed that way. And I think there's a lot of beautiful things about his design, but it's just harder for me to connect with a silent protagonist. I didn't feel like I understood his motivations. And in Breath of the Wild, the main narrative is that you wake up without your memory. So he doesn't even understand his motivations. Yeah. So anyway, I couldn't stick with Breath of the Wild. I didn't feel connected to it. I didn't understand why I should feel like I wanted to run around. And just the idea of exploring a huge world was not enough to pull me through. I've read a lot of reviews of Breath of the Wild. I know it's a game that was really beloved. It's held up as one of the best games of all time. But when I played it back in 2017, I didn't see it. I tried the game a few different times, tried to pick it back up, and still didn't see it. And it didn't connect with me. But that is really my only touchstone for this, multi-decade long franchise now. Yeah. Is Breath of the Wild.
Phew. I'm so glad that Tears of the Kingdom came out.
Me too, because, not to spoil anything, but I think I can say definitively that we both are really enjoying our time with Tears of the Kingdom.
Fuck yeah.
I am about 85 hours in, and I have not beat the main story.
No. I'm close behind you.
You're close behind me? Yeah, what's your clock looking like?
The Switch, it doesn't really give, at least if maybe I'm doing it wrong, but the Switch doesn't really give you exact play times for games.
Yeah, it's kind of like a rounding thing that it does.
Like, just tell me, bro. You obviously know. But yeah, it says 80 hours or more. So I'm right on your heels, even though I started playing it like 3 weeks after you started. I really got into it.
I got into Diablo 4 in the middle there. That definitely hurt things. But yeah. So we've been playing the fuck out of this game, and we are really loving it. And so the rest of this episode is going to be dedicated to talking about everything that we're enjoying and all of our experiences playing Tears of the Kingdom. But just a caveat that, neither of us have finished the game. And frankly, I don't think this is the kind of game that you have to quote unquote beat it or quote unquote roll credits to be able to have an opinion about. Because I mean, at what point I've put, we both put more than 80 hours into this game. And I think that's worth saying something, that we can do that much, still not having completed the story, and still are coming out right now being like, wow, this game is incredible. So with that in mind, then what are you loving about Tears of the Kingdom?
Oh, man. I mean, one, I'll say, I feel like it's save for a few small complaints, I think it's really mastered this goal of truly offering a non-linear adventure experience, and unbridled exploration in a way that keeps encouraging you to do more and find more to do. I really there's this concept of markers in the game where you have these kind of binoculars you can use to zoom out and zoom in and see locations far away and like drop a glowing marker on them that you can use to navigate. And I am using the heck out of those markers. You have 6 and I'm constantly having to negotiate which one I'm gonna let go of. And maybe on my way to reaching one, I get distracted by something else. Like there is just truly and seemingly endless possibilities of activities and things to do in this game. And there's no one way to solve a problem. I think this game just does a beautiful job of really allowing you to solve puzzles or achieve milestones in ways that make the most sense to you. And we can sort of get into like the specific mechanics, but I've just never felt such open possibility from a game and for such a canvas for creation. Like I feel like really, I know you said this before too, so I might be just taking this right out of your mouth, but like I feel like the main thing holding me back is my own creativity, like my own ability to look at something from a new perspective, or even to stop overthinking it and just stick a bunch of logs together and build a bridge and call it a day. Like I don't need to do something super spectacular to like solve a problem. It just feels like they really thought through how to make everything work together in a way where you're never having to do the same thing the same way twice. Like nothing feels tedious. Even if the mission at hand is find 12 of these locations throughout the map and that's a side mission, it's like, okay, that sounds something that would be kind of boring in my typical open world game. I'm going to just ride to get there or use fast travel. And this is a game where I almost like prefer to not use fast travel. Like I'm notorious for trying to unlock fast travel as quickly as I can in any game and getting super annoyed with games like Horizon where it's like, I have to find a fucking campfire before I can go somewhere. Like I actually prefer just, getting there on foot. And that's saying a lot for a game with such a vast world as this. And I have to fucking say, like, the Nintendo Switch is what, like 8 years old at this point?
Well, the Switch came out the same time as Breath of the Wild, so it'd be 2017, right? Okay. So 6 years?
Yeah. I mean, shit, the fact that
and it was outdated a little bit at the time that it released too. Yeah. It did not have the same kind of power that the other current consoles did when it came out.
Yeah, and yet, like this game for like I think the fact that Nintendo tends to lean on more like we're not trying to go for like hyper realistic like next gen in terms of, or what we consider to be next gen when we think of like graphical quality or special effects or things like that. Like I think the fact that it leans on a more cartoony, lower poly style like helps with this. But this game for what it's doing and what it's created feels very next generation gaming, and I can't deny that. So I just feel like kudos to Nintendo Switch for being able to carry this kind of title, which feels incredibly expansive and like an entirely different Hyrule than what was even in Breath of the Wild. So that's maybe some of my opening thoughts on the game. I will say, I said to Jamie right before this that my thesis of today is I get it now.
Yeah, I think that's a good thesis. And I would also agree that I get it now. I wonder what... I've found myself being very curious what my experience would be to go back to Breath of the Wild now, because I do find myself wondering how much has actually changed from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom versus how much I've changed in the past 6 years as a gamer, what I'm looking for from a gaming experience and what I want out of it. I mean, at the time that Breath of the Wild came out, it was considered like really unique in terms of its design, the way that it was not handhold for an open world game. It was not, when you pick up a quest, you don't get every marker for everything you need to do dropped on your map. It was asking you to do some of the work to figure out where you needed to go and what you needed to do, and asking you to actually listen to the things people were saying to you, or not actually listen because it's text on a screen, but read, understand what's being asked of you, and make, apply critical thinking to what needed to happen next, as opposed to, well, just climb this tower and then you'll get 100 markers on your map. No, instead it's climb this tower. You're going to be able to see everything. You put the markers on your map. You decide what looks interesting, right? You decide what looks interesting and figure out what you want to go do. And in 2017, when I did that, I was just like, I'm overwhelmed. There's too many options. So I can't decide what I want to do. I was so annoyed by things like weapon durability, and because this game, your weapons break. Any weapon you pick up, it's going to eventually break. No matter how powerful it is, no matter how good it is, anything you pick up, it's going to eventually break. You have to cook food for yourself to be able to heal yourself. There's no just like finding magical potions that are going to heal you or anything like that. You have to pick up, pick tomatoes and apples and kill deer, and then bring that stuff to a pot in a town and actually put the ingredients together and experiment with that. It's not like you have a recipe book. It's like figure out which things you need to combine that make a meal that has the impact that you want it to have. You want to climb up that snowy mountain? Well, it's going to be pretty cold up there. You're going to have to either get yourself some warmer armor, or maybe you can cook a meal that will give you cold resistance, or maybe there's certain gems and stuff in the game that if you attach them to your shield, you can. There's just all these things that I'm pretty sure a lot of this existed in Breath of the Wild, but in Breath of the Wild, I reacted to it completely differently. I felt overwhelmed. I felt confused and unclear on what I needed to do. And really the only option I felt like I had was to keep walking or keep climbing. And then I felt limited by my own stamina meter, right? Or the ability of my horse to go somewhere. And so I do think that one of the key differences with Tears of the Kingdom, and what makes it, I think, much more immediately accessible and digestible to get you over that hump of understanding how the game world works, so that then you're excited by the breadth of things on offer to do, as opposed to overwhelmed by them, I think is the abilities that they give you. And they give you the core ones right from the beginning. Like literally almost as soon as you have control of Link, you start to get your core abilities, and you play through what's essentially a tutorial section of the game. It is a sky island. I think we're going to quote unquote spoil a handful of things in the very early game of Tears of the Kingdom here. I think anything we're about to talk about has either been shown in trailers, shown in gameplay demos of the game, or talked about extensively in the reviews. We're not looking to spoil anything like in terms of the story or anything that happens late game or anything like that. But if you're trying to go into Tears of the Kingdom with completely no knowledge about it, you probably shouldn't be listening to this conversation. Yeah. I'll just say before we talk anymore.
Also, good luck to you at this point.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, this game has permeated everything, and particularly social media. So you wake up, you're on a sky island at the very beginning of the game, and the sky islands are very high up in the air. It's essentially a whole new map that's layered on top of the original Hyrule map. And I think this is one of the cool things that this game does, is that you essentially have three tiers, TIERS, of the kingdom that each give you a whole different map and world to explore. And the highest of those are the Sky Islands, which are giant floating ruins in the air. And the people of Hyrule have become aware of these Sky Islands because, as part of the upheaval, big chunks of them started to crash to the ground. But the Sky Islands proved to have a bunch of ruins and history from the Zonai, which were a people that originally inhabited Hyrule. And one of the final Zonai began the land of Hyrule with a Hylian queen, and they basically are like the four founders of Hyrule and like the land and peoples that we know today in the modern era.
Yeah.
So the game starts you off up on this island, and over the course of kind of a short little quest chain that's like very tutorial in nature, with some cute little robot guys.
Oh my gosh.
Kind of telling you the information that you need to have and giving you your first weapon and stuff. You get access to the powers of Ultra Hand, Fuse, Ascend, and Recall. And those are the 4 main abilities that you're going to have in the game. These are different than what Link has in Breath of the Wild. They actually take away all the powers that you had in Breath of the Wild, and instead you get these abilities, and you have them within, I mean, I don't know how long that Sky Island section took you, but, you know, less than 3 hours than the first few hours of the game. You have these 4 core abilities. Ultra Hand is essentially an ability that lets you pick up objects and move them around, rotate them, move them, place them, set them in different things. You can just kind of freehand pick them up with this magical power that's it's almost like telekinesis, basically. Yeah. Move things around. Fuse allows you to take an object off the ground and attach it to either your weapon or your shield, or using Ultra Hand, you can attach to separate objects that you can move around to each other. Fuse is very helpful for making shields that have interesting effects when enemies hit them, and creating weapons that do more than their base damage. You get, a lot of times you're connecting your weapon to, fusing it to like a monster part, like a horn or a tooth or something that fell off of a monster that you killed, and it will add a bunch of damage to your weapon, or maybe increase its durability, things like that. Ascend. I love Ascend so much.
Oh my God.
And I also love the story behind Ascend, which I want to get into in a second. Yeah. But Ascend basically means that if you are inside of a place that has land above it, land or structure above it, there's a roof above your head, and it is within a certain distance, it's like close enough to you, you can use the Ascend ability, and Link will shoot straight up, and the fucking sound he makes is fantastic. Yeah. But he basically goes straight up into the ceiling, thunk, and like morphs through like the ceiling, swims through it as though it were like just water instead of, you know, solid rock or whatever, and appears standing at the top of the structure. So it is like your get out of jail free card when you are deep in a cave and you just want to GTFO. If you're, it's come in handy so many times. I need to get up this mountain as quickly as possible. Let me just find an overhang and then I'll ascend up. And it's just beep, it's instant elevator. Now, did you hear that Ascend was originally a tool that they made for debugging the game?
Oh my God, stop.
There was not an intention to put it in the game.
Oh my God.
But the developers found it so useful and fun that they decided to put it in the game.
That's fucking
Doesn't
amazing.
That totally recontextualize that tool? Because it's like, oh, obviously this is just a developer tool.
Yes. And because it's so, like, the amount of temples or puzzles I fucking cheesed by just looking for a spot where I can ascend and totally skip the intended puzzles that were thoughtfully put together for me. Like, it all makes sense now.
But I feel like there's one more power that I want to talk about, so I'm derailing a little bit here. But what's so amazing to me about Ascend and the fact that they decided to put that in the game, despite it being a debug tool, despite it being something that is arguably game breaking, quote unquote, in a lot of ways, like, I feel like that just speaks to the confidence of them knowing what they had and knowing that was going to just make things more fun. That rather than making people like, because it's fun to cheese it. It's fun to cheat it. It's fun to find a way around the puzzle. Yeah. Like, it's cool if I feel like I'm finding the established solution, but I can't. So one thing that we haven't really touched on with the Zelda games is that a key element of them is puzzle solving. Yes. Like, they are action adventure games, and specifically this modern iteration of them is super, exploration is super important. There's huge open world games, but there are designated things, you know, shrines and temples and things of this nature, which are small, the temples are very large, but they're contained areas that have puzzles built into them that you need to solve to achieve, maybe it's kind of like a skill point sort of a thing, or open up a boss fight or move the story forward or whatever. There's different things tied to the puzzles. I don't know how many times, so my partner's been playing the game too. I don't know how many times I've done a shrine, which is a contained puzzle area, come up with the solution and been like, oh, surely that was like the intended solution, that I don't even see how anyone could solve this a different way.
Yeah.
And my partner will be sitting there next to me like totally surprised that what I'd done had even worked, or like that was a way to solve it because he'd done it a completely different way. That's really fucking special.
Yeah.
That's really fucking special.
Yeah.
So I just think being like, hey, here's this ability that breaks the game a little bit, that's going to give people an easy out and a way to like skip entire sections of the map or entire routes if they want to. But we feel strongly enough that we've got a really interesting game that people aren't going to want to just cheese their way through the whole thing, or that if they do, it's going to feel fun. Just throw it in there.
Totally.
Just throw it in there. Just give it to them. Why hold that back? I think it's so fucking cool.
Yeah. And too, like we were kind of touching on earlier, like it's such classic Legend of Zelda vibes for that to be a thing. Because so much of these earlier games, I mean, the earlier entries in the series were notorious for being incredibly difficult. Like people still talk about how the water temple in Ocarina of Time is like infamous for being one of the most difficult and detested dungeons of any video game of all time. And these games were built in a way where people would spend hours just looking for secrets. And so having something like Ascend that's designed to help you find things that might be hidden or get through something in a way that you hadn't thought of before, or just like kind of breaking through that layer of mystery and like finding a way through that. Like it just feels very quintessential in a way that it's hard to articulate, but I totally agree with you. It just feels right. And I love that story.
Yeah, it's so great. And then the final ability, the core ability that you get in the intro of the game is called Recall. And Recall is, Ultra Hand and Fuse are great. They're very utility-based abilities. I'm super impressed with Ascend because it is this debug thing that they put in the game. And I'm super impressed with Recall because I don't understand how they could possibly make this fucking work. What Recall does is that not all, but a large number of objects in the game can be rewound. Almost any object that moves, you can use Recall on it to rewind its movement back in time. That might sound like, maybe that doesn't sound very impressive, but the number of things, the physics that have to get built into that, and the fact that that means every object in the game, including ones that you are not interacting with, like these are, especially with the Sky Islands, there are like rocks and things just falling from the ground at any time. The fact that you could just approach one of these rocks and that rock has a memory of where it was before, and that you can rewind that memory and use that to like as an elevator, like climb on the rock that's sitting on the ground, rewind it so it zips back up into the sky. But they had to design that. Like all those rocks have to have that memory of where they came from, and that the game runs smoothly despite holding all of this information at any given time. It's mind-boggling.
The first time I fucking figured that out, I was like, it was like a whole new world of exploration just unfolded before my eyes. Also, the first time I realized that, like, if a monster is shooting a projectile at you, that you can fucking use Recall on that thing and have it hit them right back in the face. Like, oh my God, there's just, again, it's just like my own creativity holding me back from just playing with this game.
And the things you move too, that's what really is, like, I can grab an object with Ultra Hand, move it all around in some wackadoo pattern, and then use Recall on it, and it will follow that pattern in reverse. I don't understand enough about game development to know for sure that that's complicated, but it seems like it would be complicated to make it so that any object that moves in the game has the ability to remember the movement pattern that it traced for at least 30 seconds in the past, and like to just be constantly rewriting that information and remembering it and holding it. That seems complicated. It seems like that's a really big development feat from someone who knows nothing about development. Maybe it's super easy, but I don't think it is. So yeah, those are the main abilities that you get. And I think those abilities immediately open the world up. I mean,
Yeah.
They're very OP. And as soon as you leave the tutorial island and make it back down to the main Hyrule, the other thing the game does is that it immediately and regularly gives you like boxes of toys. So the game has this premise that, you know, Hylians, they're all trying to rebuild following the upheaval. And so there's just construction tools and materials left around at random intervals. Well, probably not very random, actually. Like they're actually like really well spread out.
Yeah.
And so you basically have between that and what's called the Zonai machines,
Right.
which are
Remnants
I don't want to spoil too much.
It's advanced society.
Yeah, remnants of the advanced society that basically take the form of things like fans or
wheels.
Wheels. They're things that are kind of closer to like modern day. There's like a rocket, tools and pieces of equipment that we would probably see in more modern day, but within the context of the game, these are actually from a society that was really advanced that's long since passed. But you can encounter these materials in the world. You can encounter them pretty frequently. And there's also these large like Zonai vending machines where you can input some materials and get back a bunch of Zonai materials in like these capsules that you can open up and use in the world when you want to quickly be able to build something. And so the game very much immediately gives you these really powerful tools and access to materials that you need to be able to use those tools. And again, it's like you said before, quoting myself back to me, the game immediately is like, the only limitations you have here are your own creativity, and the world is your oyster.
Yeah.
Like, go do what you want to do. And the result is it's an incredibly empowering experience, which is the exact opposite of how I felt playing Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, totally. And it's still like a difficult game. Like I think something that I struggled with early on was I had a pretty steep learning curve with all that there was to wrap my head around to be able to utilize the game to its full potential. And it's also things like combat can be hard. Like I'm someone who really sucks at parrying. And I think to be successful in this game, hand-to-hand combat really depends on that. Like you are one small person facing down these hordes of monsters and old machines. And, it's very common to get like one shot and you're dead, especially in the beginning of the game when you only have 3 hearts. And as soon as I realized like, hey, you don't have to just run headlong into these battles. Like you could build a contraption that maybe helps solve that problem for you. Or actually you could just avoid it entirely. Like you don't have to go across this land, like fighting everything you see. Like everything just unfolded for me. And I think it's made this very dangerous world so much more, like you were saying, approachable, and you feel much more empowered. I was telling Jamie it feels like playing baby Elden Ring, because it's very open. It doesn't necessarily say like, hey, you're not ready to fight this monster. It just kind of like you die, and then it has a very forgiving revival system where it just takes you to it's auto saving pretty much constantly. So it just takes you right back to right before you face that monster with all of your items, all of the health you had before. Like it's very forgiving in terms of like there's no harm done if you die and get that game over screen. But still like just that dawning realization that like I could make this game what I wanted, and it didn't have to be like this hack and slash kind of adventure. Like I could just do my own thing and either skirt enemies or use these items at my disposal to make it a much more even playing field. It made me excited to go out and explore in a way that I was very scared to do in Elden Ring.
Yeah. I think clicking on that comparison to Elden Ring for a second, or sticking with that for a moment, I am someone that played a lot of Elden Ring, right? I put like 100 odd hours into the game, didn't beat the story, but clearly really loved the game, had a great time with it. One of my biggest complaints about Elden Ring is that for as cool as the world was and the lore of the world was, the only thing there was to do, no matter what, no matter where I went and explored, no matter where I found myself in the world, secret elevators, anything like that, anything cool I found. It was all just taking me to a fight.
Yeah.
That was it. The end all be all of everything was combat. Even if I found a chest, like 95% of the time, there was not anything in that chest that I really wanted. It was just combat. Like, and for a lot of players, for Soulsborne players, like that is the reward, right? Finding a cool boss fight, and then overcoming it is what's meant to be fun about those games. And it worked for me for a long time with the game, but it did eventually wear thin. And I think with Tears of the Kingdom, well, you know, you could argue, well, this is like it's easier Elden Ring, or it's baby's Elden Ring, right? Because it takes a lot of the game design and world design principles that apply to Elden Ring apply here. And then Zelda is just making all of that a lot more accessible. But I think more even than just being accessible, Zelda is giving you a lot more to do. Like there's so much more variety of things that you can do in the world in Tears of the Kingdom than there was in Elden Ring by far.
Yeah.
Combat is one piece of things. You could play this game like Elden Ring where your whole mission is just to go around and kill goblins. But, you know, there's shrines and puzzles to solve. There's caves to explore and booble gems to collect. There's chests in the game galore, and the chests, by and large, have any variety of things in it. It was something that, this was, again, another thing with like Breath of the Wild. I remembered being so frustrated by the weapon durability system and feeling like I'd get to a chest and I'd open it up and it's like, it's fucking arrows again. I don't need arrows. I need a better weapon, right? Or opening the chest and then you do find a good weapon. It's like, great. Now I don't want to use this because it's just going to break, right? This was an issue I always had with Breath of the Wild. But in this game, I think, and again, because I was able to get over that hurdle and starting to understand the game design and understand the loop that they're putting you in, I'm no longer bothered by the weapon durability. I'm no longer bothered by the fact that the chests can have such a myriad of things in it. And sometimes you open it up and it's a weapon that does 30 damage, but most of the time you open it up and it's 5 arrows. And
I'm like, thank Christ, because arrows are so hard to find in this game.
Thank God, I need arrows. And I'm no longer as bothered by the fact that the weapon's gonna, a lot of this comes down to fuse, but like, if that weapon that I find that does 30 damage, guess what? I'm going to fuse that with one of the most powerful monster parts I have, and that's going to be my weapon that does like 80 damage, and that's going to be my boss killer. I'm going to hang on to that for a boss. But I can make 15 weapons that do 30 damage. All I need is a stick and a monster part, and I'm good to go, right? And so I don't feel like I'm trying to hang on to these weapons in the same way anymore. And the fact that the chest could have anything in it is like, well, whatever I find in there's going to be useful. If it's a gem, I can sell it. If it's a bit of food, I can use that and cook it into a thing. If it's arrows, great. I always need more fucking arrows. And if it happens to be a weapon, great. I'll add that to the inventory and I'll attach a cool monster part to, and we'll be good to go. It doesn't matter what's in the chest. What's fun is figuring out how I'm going to get to the chest and open it.
Absolutely. And God, like you were talking a bit about Fuse and just how it's really solved the frustration of what was in the previous game, this dread of like, oh, fuck, I know this weapon is going to leave me soon and I'm going to have to scrounge around for something else. Like this concept of Fuse and how you can literally fuse anything, like even the fucking rocks that fall from the sky that you can ride up, you can fuse those guys too to stuff. You can fuse parts of bosses you're fighting to like throw them off. You can like, it really just, the more you play with it, the more exciting it is to be constantly cycling through weapons. Like I'm almost like, oh, I can't wait to see what kind of weapon I can make next, instead of, oh no, I'm going to lose this weapon. And that is just pure, user experience design gone right, that they took something that was dreaded in a previous game and made it something to look forward to in the next. Like what more can you ask for from iterative development? Like that's something to nerd out about, just from a like how shit's made kind of perspective. But too, like I had mentioned the difficulty in fighting earlier and how that was something that would typically turn me off from a game like this. But in this game, like the prospect of getting like a Lizalfo tail, or like a cool horn from, or helm from like a construct. Like I'm actually sort of like, ooh, a passing rove of enemies. I kind of want to jump into the fray because I might get some cool stuff that I can fuse. Like the fact that the thing that used to repel me from this type of game is now something that I look forward to because of what it's given me in terms of shit to play with. I'm just, my mind is blown by that turnaround, and I just can't commend it enough.
Well, and to your point with about the combat earlier, one complaint that I have about the game, and like for as much as the tutorialization on the Sky Island with your initial abilities, I thought was really well done. There are weird places where the game just doesn't tell you how things work that I feel like is just a bad decision. I don't know if I would call it bad game design, but just a bad decision. One of those specifically is with the combat. The only thing you learned on the original Sky Island is like how to put your shield up and how to swing your weapon.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, how to shoot an arrow. Doesn't give you any more details about how combat works. Instead, if you want to learn things like parrying and dodging, you have to encounter a shrine that's like in your path. It's in your main path if you follow the main quest. Like, it's right there. You're going to walk right past it. You're probably going to do it. But if you don't do that shrine, or if you don't jump right into the main quest, you're not going to know how to parry or dodge. Now,
True.
Can you get through the game without knowing those things? Yeah, absolutely. I don't parry. I don't dodge. I'm not doing that. I'm designing a weapon that can do a lot of damage. I'm waiting for an opening and I'm just running in and smacking the shit out of the enemy. Or I'm throwing a bomb at them, or I'm throwing white choo-choo jelly, which freezes them. Like stuff like this. I'm finding different ways to like make an entry for myself that isn't parrying, because I think the parrying mechanic is kind of shit. But I think it's kind of silly that they put that in a shrine that you could easily miss rather than just showing the player it.
Yeah.
And the only reason I can think for doing that is that they want you to experiment a bit before you learn those basic mechanics, because they are so avoidable. But then it's like, then why have them in the game? Like, that feels like there's something weird happening there that doesn't quite fit together for me with some of those combat mechanics, because combat is a huge part of the game, but like it really can be so easy or so hard. Yeah. Depending on how you approach it. And if you approach it in a really straightforward manner, like you were describing you were doing initially, you're going to have a bad time pretty quickly. Pretty quickly. You're going to get your shit rocked. So, I think some of that, they could have been a little more, I don't know, they could have encouraged a little more experimentation with that and maybe opened some of those tools up a little more directly for players. Yeah. No, this is a game that's one of my few complaints.
Yeah, it's like exploration is not just encouraged; it's kind of a requirement to really get the most out of this. That's a great point. Like, you're gonna have a hard time if you're not getting off the beaten path a bit.
Yeah. Speaking of exploration, then, fuck, this world is huge.
Jesus, yeah.
What are some of your favorite things to do? Like, what are you finding rewarding about the exploration and getting out there in the world?
Yeah, so I knew that the Sky Islands were a thing and that the surface world was a thing. The second that I realized there was a whole third full-ass map in the depths underground, that was when I think my mind fully exploded. I was just like, this shit just keeps going. So, I think I told you at first, like, I was very scared of the depths. Like, you are literally dropped down to a not near endless chasm.
and also, like, that's another technical, like, wowie thing that they do. The way those three worlds are stacked on top of each other, the scale of them, and the fact that it seamlessly loads in the time that it takes Link to fall between the worlds. Sorry, keep going, but I just wanted to insert that real quick. It's like the technical, it's so impressive how seamless that is to move between the three. Again, I love that it's the Tears of the Kingdom and the Tears of the King, TIERS, TEARS. It's great.
It's
Continue.
So good. No, yeah, like I think, again, I'm just endlessly giving credit to this game for giving me a space to explore things that would normally turn me away or scare me. But I think I remember telling you early on, like, oh my God, I don't know about this depth situation. Like, you're dropped down. It is literally pitch black around you. You are deep, deep underground. You have these items you can find called bright bloom seeds, and you literally are Hansel and Greteling your way through this underground world, dropping seeds behind you to give you little bursts of light, just enough to understand the shapes of things around you. There could be monsters coming at you in the dark. There could be, cliffs that you fall down. Like, you really don't know. And you can sort of walk around until you find these dormant, they're called light roots. And they correspond, again, mind-boggling. Like, you sort of learn over time that for each shrine that you encounter on the surface world, underneath each one is a corresponding light root. And when you touch that light root, it sends out massive, it's like a lighthouse, basically, and lights up a certain perimeter around you. And so that's your way of uncovering the map in the depths. And lighting up a big enough area that you don't have to be shooting out these seeds left and right to see your path. And at first I was very wary of the depths. But it's the best place to find certain materials that you can use to upgrade your weapons or upgrade this like battery that you have that can power the constructs that you build using Zonai devices for traversal or weaponry or what have you. And there's also, in the depths, there is a proliferation of bomb flowers, which are this rare kind of plant that you can attach it to arrows, you can throw it, but it's a powerful explosion. You can use it to break through rocks and caves or take down bosses. But I was using them willy-nilly in the beginning of the game before I quickly realized that they're much scarcer than I thought they were. So I was like,
Whoopsie.
Well, fuck, I've got to go in these depths and fucking find these bomb flowers. And quickly I started to just really enjoy it. Like, I think, again, part of the accessibility of the game is that, like, you can fast travel your way out of a situation whenever you're feeling threatened. Like, even if you're in the middle of a boss battle, you can leave. There are certain enemies that are very powerful called Lionels. They're kind of like horse dudes. They're like
centaur lions.
Yeah, like centaurs. Yeah, centaur lions. Yeah. But it's like, if you until you draw your weapon, they actually won't attack you. I didn't realize this. But you can just walk right up to them, and as long as you don't have your weapon drawn, like, they're very honorable. They're not going to just come for you. So there's a ton of those guys down there, but, like, it's not that big a deal if you're going about it in a safe way. And this, like, surprising myself, I started getting really into just exploring the depths. Like, it truly feels like, again, that feeling of mystery and exploration that is so core to these games, of just like, there's a world with its own language and its own history and its own depth. And you don't know all of it, either because your memories have been taken away, or there's relics in a language that no one understands yet, or there's mysteries that have been laying dormant for centuries and you are discovering them now. Like, it gives you that. And so I'm really into exploring the depths, trying to hit light roots and light them up. I think I've been, to answer your question, I've been most interested in the kind of world building side quests more so than like the main storyline. Like, I too am 80 plus hours in, and I'm still only 3/4 of the way through the first major main quest. And that's just because I've gotten really into, like, the towny drama that you encounter at the different villages, or there's all these floating ruins that have these mysterious tablets, and I've gotten really into taking pictures of those and working with a historian to decipher them. I've gotten really into hitting all the shrines or finding all the light roots, and just really enjoying traversing the land, even on my own 2 feet, taming a horse, maybe riding with them for a while. using ascend or recall to get to a really high place and then seeing where I can paraglide. Like that's where so much enjoyment, aimless enjoyment is for me. And that is just so new of a thing for me in a game like this.
Yeah. Yeah. The game feels, and again, I wonder what going back to Breath of the Wild would teach me, as to whether or not this is if I'm misremembering Breath of the Wild, but there's a vibrancy and an interconnectedness to the world in Tears of the Kingdom that I don't recall feeling in Breath of the Wild.
Same.
In fact, in Breath of the Wild, I felt very alone and isolated and confused. Again, coming back to that feeling of overwhelmed, confused, not empowered, lost that I felt with Breath of the Wild that I don't have with Tears of the Kingdom. I feel like there's constantly something else in Tears of the Kingdom to move on to, and the way everything relates back to each other relates back to the history of Hyrule, the speed with which I can move from a sky island to the mainland down to the depths. It all just makes it so seamless, and I constantly feel like I'm being drawn to the next thing. There's a quote that I wanted to share from Carolyn Pettit's Legend of Zelda review that she wrote for Kotaku, where she's talking about this kind of interconnectedness of the world. And she writes that in Tears of the Kingdom, I wander alone, and yet the game always makes me feel deeply connected to Hyrule and thus to all things. I hunt, I forage, I use the bounty of one region to aid me in another. I build, I create, I destroy, I witness. I take photos and catalog Hyrule's wildlife. I soar and I spelunk. I help a guy put up signs. Some games are so player focused that you feel like it's all about you, like the world revolves around you. In Tears of the Kingdom, you feel that there is a vast tapestry of life going on around you, and you are just one part of it, as much a part of it as anyone else. I prefer this feeling. I think that really touches on something that I found to be both so starkly different than the feelings I had about Breath of the Wild, and what has really kept me going with this game for over 80 hours, despite not completing the main story, despite not having that narrative hook. I think the story is interesting. Like the main story that I've experienced has been interesting, and I feel compelled to proceed with it. But the entire world is full of story and full of characters who feel interesting and who have interesting problems. And even when I'm not being pulled through with a narrative, I'm being pulled through with my own desire to explore a shrine and solve the puzzle, or find a new area that might have its own narrative to put together. And that in both the way that every object in the game has a memory of the movement that it's taken. It's like the entire land of Hyrule has this memory. Like it all feels very lived in and steeped in its own history in a way that's just like very cool. It's not something I've experienced in a video game world before.
Oh my God. Yes. All of that. First, also, can I say the writing that has come out from reviewers and just like the think pieces coming out and the sort of meditations on the game. I'm being moved to tears left and right just reading what people have been writing about this game. And I think that speaks to what you're feeling too from this. So that's one thing. I think all that quote you just read from Carolyn's article definitely hits. I think too, like in Breath of the Wild, Link wakes up with no memory of who he is. He has no idea what he's doing, why he's there. The land of Hyrule is very empty, lonely, and desolate. And it's a game that is pretty steeped in this kind of melancholic feeling. I feel like by the time we get to Tears of the Kingdom, the land of Hyrule has just reclaimed itself from this horrible calamity. And it feels like there's a resilience there. There's this unwillingness to give up what was just so hard won back. Like you walk around and you see travelers like you crossing the land. You see people who are actively rebuilding. You see other adventurers or just common people who are just like, I don't want like we're not going back. Like we're here and we're not going anywhere. Like, and you see too that, there was the event where you and Zelda were lost in the beginning of the game. Link comes back and some time has passed, maybe a few days to a few weeks. And it's like people have started forming camps or forming task forces or forming monster hunting parties to try to figure out for themselves what's going on. There's search parties looking for the princess. Like people are, it feels like they're inspired by what transpired in the last game and feeling empowered themselves to kind of go out and solve this mystery. And they're happy to have you back, but it's not that they don't need you, but they're not like wholly depending on you to be the end all be all hero and save the day. And I feel like it lends there's just this energy of like resilience moving through this game that just makes it feel so much more full of hope. I think what you said about the land holding all of that history, that feeds into it too. Like it just feels so much more alive than Breath of the Wild. And you as a player, as Link, having, maybe it's the fact that you do have memories of who you were, at least over the past few years. You do have relationships with people who remember you and are your friend. Like you have these connections. Like it just feels so much more communal and uplifting than Breath of the Wild did. Like, I don't know. I just, everything you're saying just hits.
Yeah. What you're saying right now too is reminding me of this. This is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but yeah. One thing as I was playing the game, particularly the first like big narrative quest that you're sent on, you're asked to investigate some regional phenomenon that's happening in 4 different parts of the country. And as you start to investigate these regional phenomenon, they are all I just felt like a deep similarity, or whether it's intentional or not, like the things that were happening just reminded me of stuff we were seeing happening in our real world around climate change. Like these are all like big, an area that had historically been, cold, but like not, very livable, and the people were able to make a life for themselves, is suddenly being racked with like really intense snowstorms. The desert areas it's like getting hit with these like incredible heat waves during the day, dust storms and tornadoes. There's forest fires. Like there are things that climate phenomenon that are happening in these regions, and the way people are pulling together around them. It all just like really struck me as being, I was like, I don't know if this is intentional or if there's an actual like allegory for climate change happening here, but it was just reminding me of things that we're seeing happen in our world right now. And so I Googled, just like seeing if this was something anyone else had picked up on, or if anyone else was thinking about this. I just Googled Tears of the Kingdom climate change.
Yeah.
And I came across this piece written by Fran Ruiz for The Escapist called In Tears of the Kingdom, Everyone is Chill About the Second Apocalypse, for Better or Worse. And one of the things that Fran was talking about in the piece is the specific place and time that Tears of the Kingdom takes place, as you were touching on, is like people are already in a process of rebuilding, and there is this resiliency that the community has around them. And Fran was actually drawing parallels to the way we have gone through the pandemic and now are seeing some of these like more drastic effects of climate change that are happening in the world, and sort of both the ways people are approaching that and this kind of like in between apocalypses that we kind of feel like we're living through, and how some of that gets paralleled in the game. And Fran is also kind of positing in the piece whether or not the pandemic had an impact. I mean, obviously the people writing this game and making this game lived through the pandemic during the process of making the game, and whether or not we're actually seeing some of that show up in the way characters in the game are behaving. But a few things that they noted is like how much the game relies on scientists, and the idea that people are, you go out on this main quest being driven by a scientist and researcher telling you we need to learn more about this phenomenon. How many data-driven decisions and research-based decisions characters are making in the game. It's just really interesting, I think. I don't know. I haven't finished the story or anything, so it's hard for me to make a definitive point or say the game is definitely saying one thing or the other. But it created some interesting parallels that have got me kind of like thinking. It's just kind of cool to see that even a game like Legend of Zelda could be drawing inspiration from these places.
Totally. It's everything everywhere all at once.
But let's talk a little bit about Link.
Yeah.
Link himself as a character, the narrative, Link and Zelda. I wanted to give you a chance to speak about this because I know Link is a non-binary icon, trans icon, some might say, whether or not some of the angry cis gamers want to believe it or not. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Link as a trans icon?
Yeah, I mean, as a trans person, I think from how I was describing my history with this game series earlier, oh no, I'm already starting to tear up. I think it's just hitting me.
Oh boy.
It's just like, he's always been someone, I think, obviously as a silent protagonist, he's designed to be someone that you can project yourself onto. But I think a lot of us in the transmasculine community specifically have loved Link because he portrays a kind of masculinity that isn't dependent on hyper masculine stereotypes to be seen as valid. I think, he has a femininity to him. He has a softness. He has a goofiness. Even in the animations of him cooking or him eating, like he'll just do things in a very cute and funny way. He'll have very silly facial reactions to things. Like he's not afraid to look goofy, or, there's not perfect representation, but there's definitely some really messy and outright problematic ways that this has been handled in previous games, particularly in Breath of the Wild. But there's the Gerudo people who are primarily women, and they have a town where no men are allowed to enter. And Link has to don feminine clothing to enter this town. He never expresses shame or discomfort at wearing women's clothes. There's a scene where a character compliments how pretty he looks in those clothes, and he blushes and smiles. Like, he is not afraid of any aspect of masculinity, or has doesn't portray any insecurity in that. I think for the queer community, there's this piece I was reading earlier by Linda Kodega called "A Link Between Genders: Trans Joy and the Legend of Zelda," that's published on Gizmodo. And they talk about how Link has often been described by folks in the queer community as an egg cracker. And that's like someone or something that helps you realize that you're trans. And so many people through playing Link have come to the understanding that they are trans or non-binary or both through playing as him. And actually, there was an interview in Time magazine in 2016 from a Zelda producer who's been working on the games all the way back since Ocarina of Time, Eiji Onuma. And he said, "I wanted Link to be gender neutral. I wanted the player to think maybe Link is a boy or a girl. If you saw Link as a guy, he'd have more of a feminine touch, or vice versa. If you related to Link as a girl, it was with more of a masculine aspect. I really wanted the design to encompass more of a gender-neutral figure. So I've always thought that for either female or male players, I wanted them to be able to relate to Link." And I think that really comes through and has made him someone that the queer community can really claim and feel empowered to play. This piece is full of incredibly moving quotes from trans gamers, cosplayers, writers who have had some connection to the Zelda franchise. And I was hoping to read a couple of these quotes because they really impacted me, and they resonated so deeply with my own experience playing this character. So one fan says, on Link being a silent protagonist, says, "We're an active participant even when we can't make narrative decisions, because we get to decide who Link is. It's easy to discover yourself and your gender through a character like this, and to make trans readings, as the lack of traditional gender roles creates, maybe for the first time you've seen, a world where all you have to be is kind and brave." And I think, like when you think of the relationship between Link and Zelda, there are no real like gender roles. Like no one is like, "Oh, Link, as the guy, you have to save the girl." Like in a lot of ways throughout the series, like, Zelda saves herself or helps you, quote unquote, save her by taking on other roles, like Sheik, for example, Zelda's kind of ninja spy alter ego, who is kind of genderless or even presented as a boy. Like, this game fucks with gender left and right, even while simultaneously Nintendo has characters like Birdo, which was the trans version of Yoshi that is supposed to be like a joke, poking at, harmful stereotypes about trans women, or even there's the character of Villia, which was an incredibly unfortunate choice in Breath of the Wild, the Gerudo woman who helps Link get into the Gerudo village by donning women's clothing, and who you learn is known by the town as, quote unquote, the man who sneaks in. This is a trans woman character in the game, and she's treated horribly. But these characters exist, and this game has in other ways constantly been playing with gender. So it's like, Nintendo, like, make up your mind. Like, what is going on? But anyway, another person says, to me, Link represents a kind of masculinity that I aim to embody. Protective, but not possessive. Strong, but not violent. Excitable and kind and adventurous. This person is a non-binary fan who actually took the name Link as their chosen name. The character meant that much to them. There were a few people in this article who now go by Link due to the impact this character has had on their lives. They go on to say, I think there's a lot of pressure on trans men and trans masculine folks to be, quote unquote, traditionally masculine in order to pass. But many of those features can have a crossover with toxic masculinity. But if the main character of one of the most popular video games of all time can be a softer kind of man, then I can too.
Oh,
I'm trying not to cry.
No, it's really beautiful.
One more quote I want to read. Someone says, headcanoning Link as non-binary makes me feel hope and makes me feel like my experience and my life have meaning. Their role as hero also empowers them. They are Hyrule's last hope. Not only that, Link's specific experiences make them the ideal hero for the ages, time and time again. And none of that relies on gender or sex. It relies on Link. That is extremely powerful to me and brings me immense joy and hope, because in our world, trans and non-binary people are the future. They bring beauty and perspective and wonder and joy that is both unique to their experience and also tied inextricably to the overarching human experience. It makes me hope that one day, people in our world can see us the way Zelda and Hyrule see Link, as a priceless and integral part of human life. So that's all I have to say about it. It's hard feeling. It's hard being trans right now in the world. And as much as we tell ourselves and each other that we've always been here, it can be hard to hold on to that hope in a world that's intent on pushing us out and eradicating us. And so I think this game speaks to the overwhelming power of representation, even if it's not, I mean, canonically, we have a producer of the game talking about how Link was always meant to be gender neutral. But that portrayal of that heroicism doesn't have anything to do with gender or sex, that someone can be read as either and still seen as, priceless and an integral part of human life. We need those reminders more than ever. So, I'm really proud to be a lifelong Zelda fan, and I'm really happy to be playing this game and to have a character like Link that we can all identify with and look up to.
Yeah, that's incredibly, incredibly powerful and important, and so cool that this series has existed in this way. And it's really cool to see that quote from the producer and to hear that these were things that they were even building into the character from the beginning. I think it only adds to it, right? Yeah. I think headcanon, despite what some of the haters will say, I think can be really powerful, especially for LGBTQ folks who don't get as much representation. Like sometimes building up those headcanons and seeing yourself in things and having a queer reading of things can be like, it's clearly incredibly transformative and powerful for these folks who are playing this game. And sometimes that's the only way to get that kind of representation when it's not put in media as frequently and as thoroughly as it should be. And I think anyone who wants to try to take that reading away from people, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, this reading doesn't hurt your version of the game. Go read it however you want. It's the whole fucking point of Link.
Yep.
As has been made very clear. Like, he is meant to be read however you want to read him. He's meant for you to insert yourself into his shoes. And I think that's really special that people are getting this out of these games, and have been for some time. It's really fucking cool. Thank you for bringing those quotes.
Thank you, Linda, for writing an awesome article.
Yeah, that's a great piece. Gizmodo, go check it out. Give them the click. A link between genders, trans joy, and the Legend of Zelda. And we should link that in the episode description too, so people can click through and read the whole piece. Really fucking cool. Well, Spencer, we have said so much about this game, and yet I feel we could probably talk for an hour more. We think you should go play Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is not something I ever thought I'd be sitting here saying after my experience with Breath of the Wild, but I'm so happy to have had my opinion on that reversed and to now be Breath of the Wild curious.
Same. Happy Pride Month.
But I'm going to probably need to put another 80 or so hours into the Tears of the Kingdom before I even get to that place. So catch me next year, maybe.
Totally.
When I decide to dive into Breath of the Wild. But time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where again, you can snag that monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month and get opportunities to get involved with the community and influence the show directly. If you're not up for contributing monetarily, but you enjoyed this episode, you can always show your support for free by, again, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, please, pretty please, and following us on Twitter and Instagram at Pixel Therapy Pod. That stuff really does help a small podcast like us. And you can keep up with all of this stuff and more by visiting our website at pixeltherapypod.com.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. This month, we've got a mutual aid request for you coming out of Richmond, Virginia. Richmond's in dire need of DIY spaces for dance music and for Black people. Any donation helps, as it will go towards helping DJ and producer Herbert Vasquez build a queer and trans-focused DIY space where music and community can thrive. You can learn more about this project by visiting gofundme.com. The link is Queer DIY Space in Richmond, Virginia. We'll drop that link in the show description, but that's Queer DIY Space in Richmond, VA, at GoFundMe.
Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more Pixel Therapy. Bye-bye.